Hey guys, we had an incredible weekend with the Tampa Pro. I've obviously been doing videos for it. I'll be doing videos here and there for shows, especially some of the bigger ones, as I've done before with like the Arnold and Olympia and whatnot. But this weekend was a big one, and we had a lot of controversy out there on social media. A lot of people were saying, oh, they're going smaller now, they're going smaller now. Are they actually going smaller? Did they switch it up? Did the bikini division change? I want to go into that in this video here. So every year you're going to have those shows that are those one-off shows. Those shows that kind of make it look like the division is changing to some capacity. There's a really tight girl, there's a really full girl, and people don't really understand the reasoning for it. And in this show I do understand why people think that everything's changing again. It's Laura Lee won the Chicago Pro with a perfect score, and then she goes into the Tampa Pro and gets fourth place. Jennifer, who was second place at the Olympia, who looks to be first in position to win the Olympia this year, who's a little bit more muscular, goes to third position, and everyone's like, oh, they're not going for as full of girls anymore, right? Is that what actually happened? Or is it more likely that there is a different scenario occurring? So let's go ahead and go into it. I'm going to go into a couple examples here, as you see. So this is the infamous Puerto Rico Pro that happened this year. And what happened after the Puerto Rico Pro? Well, everyone was so muscular, in the glutes especially, pushing so hard in the glutes that everyone was saying, oh, they're changing it again. It's getting to be more like wellness now. The glutes are all crazy, and it's more like wellness because you had some really, really developed glutes. You could see how hard some of these athletes were pushing in this back pose and how developed and how muscular the glutes were in some of these back shots and the quads. I mean, these are just... What happened here, right? Did the division actually change after that, or did it stick to the same as it always has been, and this is just a one-off show? What happened is obviously is just a one-off show. The next show, everything went back to normal. This is just what the judges had to choose from that day. The girls were really developed, and you have to pick from, okay, who's the best out of the girls who are overdeveloped that day? If this type of posing where you're pushing really hard on that day, yeah, it made sense because that's what they were going for that day. That's who showed up. That's how they were posing. Will it work on an Olympia level? No, because they're going to have the best of the best there. It's not going to be a one-off show. This was in Bermuda, I think. And so, even getting there was hard. So it was just a different competitor that was there than you'd have in, like, let's say, Florida or Los Angeles, California, where there's a lot of people who have access to the show. The more people that end up in a show, the more likely it's going to be a kind of a standard type of girl who shows up and a more traditional bikini athlete. When you get these one-off shows, sometimes maybe in a country that a lot of people can't get to, maybe something like India or France or something where a lot of people can't get there, or people that you haven't seen before, well, it's not that the criteria is different, it's that the judges have a limited amount of competitors to pick from, and they have to pick kind of the most traditional bikini competitor out of that group. And so remember, this show happened, the internet went nuts, everyone was like, oh, the glutes are getting so big now, the legs are getting more developed. There was even someone posing like wellness posing, like everything's changing. What happened the very next show, the very next weekend, everything went back to normal, right? This happened earlier this year again, and this competitor here won a pro show. Hamstrings obviously way tighter than you would usually pick in a pro show for a winner. This type of conditioning is you're not going to see winning an Olympia level conditioning. It's just a little bit too much in the hamstrings. But that day, was it the best one there? It was, right? So it's just these one-offs that you're going to get. And that after this show, everyone lost their mind and they were like, oh, they're going so tight now. Everyone's getting so lean. They're switching bikini again. And so that happens. Like, people get emotional because they have their favorite competitor. I had a lot of people messaging me over the weekend about it. Oh, they're going smaller again. They're going smaller again. Do you think that's good for Ashley? Do you think that's whatever? And I'm like, they're not. Where are you guys getting this from? It's craziness. It's one show. So let's go into what happened. Let's go into the reasoning why it looks that way. And I do understand why people think that it was getting smaller, but that's really, really not what happened. So let's go ahead and go into it. So here are your top 6 at the Tampa Pro, and let's look at what we're actually looking for here, right? So what we're looking for right now at this point is, are they going smaller? Is that the scenario? Or was there just something else going on here that kind of looks that way? So here's the thing. Going into this show, we already knew that Laura Lee was very developed, especially in the legs and glutes, right? We talked about that. I talked about that prior. That's one of those things I was saying that could hurt her going into the show. Last weekend, 2 weekends ago, she went and she beat Maureen at the Chicago Pro. I think it was 3 weekends ago. And so everyone thought, okay, Maureen, beat Deraja the weekend before that. So for sure, Laura Lee's going to beat Deraja because Deraja just lost to Maureen and Laura Lee just beat Maureen, right? It's one of those things. This is I don't know why people kind of think that way because there's different scenarios, right? I mean, Deraja could be much more improved in 2 weeks. It's a lot of things can change in that scenario. This is not a fight, You get like boxing matches and MMA fights, and they'll be like, especially in like boxing matches, people are like, oh, well, this guy beat that guy, so he should beat the other guy because that guy beat that guy, right? So, but it doesn't go down that way, not in Bikini. So, looking at the overall packages for everyone, right? So are they going, the reason that I think everyone thought they're going smaller is because Deraja and ISSA are that smaller build than Jennifer and Laura Lee. But is the case that they're going smaller, or is it the case that ISSA and Deraja really nailed it, that Laura Lee's just a little bit overdeveloped, and that Jennifer was just like literally a hair off? Is that more likely, or is it more likely that they're changing the entire bikini division from a week ago, right? Of course, it's more likely that Jennifer was just a hair off. And when I say a hair off, I mean like literally a hair off, And at this level, there's just no room, Jennifer's like, she's like way up there. She's like 96%. Like she's like any other show, she probably would have won it, But it's just, this was basically an Olympia level show. It was, this is going to be probably, these girls here are these, the top four here are probably going to be in the top 6 at the Olympia. Like pretty sure that's going to happen. So this is like a junior Olympia, right? And then, Laura Lee, she's just a little bit overdeveloped. I thought going into the show that her pop was going to be a plus to her because she had the same judges, but then she actually didn't have the same judges. Tyler was at the show, and last time was Steve was at the show. Steve was at the show too because he was judging as well. But Tyler is, I guess I would say, he's trained by Sandy, and Sandy's more women focused. She's like the head for women. They both are very good. They're very comparable in terms of their like judging style, like Sandy and Steve. They're like almost exact. But I will say when it comes to like the book and being by the book, I would say Tyler is like probably like the best judge out there. When it comes to like just has a really trained eye, he's studied this his whole life. He grew up with it, So his eye is just perfectly trained. If there's an option, he's going to pick it. If there's an option that's better, he's going to pick it. He's not going to get overwhelmed by someone being a name and their record and just having this assumption of, oh, this girl should win because she is whoever she is, right? He just doesn't even care. So it always comes down to their physique. It comes down to the criteria, the balance and everything else. And this show, that's what it came down to. It came down to who was the better, more balanced bikini physique that day, and that I with 100% certainty was ISSA and Deraja. And there's a strong argument for Deraja and for winning this show as well as for ISSA. I was kind of up in the air about it. I was kind of like, here's the thing, there's two different, I'm going to go into both of them, the pluses and why Deraja didn't win and why ISSA won this one too. And it's honestly like, it's kind of coin flippy, to be honest, with who you'd pick. Jennifer is, just so we're clear, guys, she did not slip at all. She is extremely competitive. She'll win pretty much any show that doesn't have this lineup in it. And she probably could have won this show too with her package being 100%. It's not, but just so you guys know, it's not that far off. It's like, I think when I started looking at pictures closer and closer, it's like a week off. It's not much. I think any other show, any other lineup, she would have just won it and would have been no problem. So let's go ahead and go into, now that we got that off the record, bikini's not changing. It's never just going to change like that. It's not just going to all of a sudden one day, one show, oh, they're going smaller, they're going harder. Like, you got to leave your emotions out of it. It's not how it goes. It's the best girl that fit the criteria the best. Sometimes judges are going to matter. Sometimes, especially as you go up the ranks, the judging gets more and more and more consistent. So, especially at the Olympia, like the Olympia will always be 100% the bikini criteria because you have the best girls there. You have the best judges there. They're establishing the criteria for the whole year that day. And if anything's ever going to change slightly, and I'm talking very slightly, it would be decided at the Olympia. It's not going to happen at these one-off shows in Puerto Rico, in Bahamas, and in France. So just so we're clear, let's get that out of here. I think that other girl with the hamstrings was like overseas somewhere, if I remember correctly. So let's just, get that out of the way. It's not going to change. Don't worry. Your sport is not, it's subjective, but it's not like that subjective to the point where they're just changing it on the drop of a dime. People are losing it this weekend saying everyone's going smaller. So first, let's go into, the bigger upsets of the day. Definitely Laura Lee and Jennifer, you'd be hard pressed to find someone saying that this wasn't an upset to some capacity, right? I mean, it just didn't seem likely that ISSA was going to come back from having to come down in size and nail her package with improvements at the same time. And I did a video on that if you guys want to see it. But my first pick was Laura Lee. And then when I saw pictures of ISSA, I was like, whoa, this changes everything. I have ISSA winning this show now. And it is, you can clearly see the difference in that video of like her glutes. So I won't go into that so much. I won't go into so much with Laura Lee because I already talked about it. She is a remarkable specimen. And, when you take this type of risk, when you have glutes that pop out like this, you're pushing it. Sometimes it's going to go good for you and the judges are going to love it because it is so wow. You see her come out and you're like, wow, it's just craziness. And then, when you get to the higher levels, sometimes it's going to go really good because it is impressive, but at the same time, it's not the bikini criteria in terms of balance. And that's where she got hurt. Tyler's going to be an Olympia judge, and he docked her for it and said, hey, it's just getting too crazy, it's getting too big, that is not what we want. And a lot of it comes down to too, like fitting the criteria, but keeping something realistic too. That's an important part of judging, is keeping the divisions realistic for people to do it, right? Now, we're not talking women's bodybuilding here. Women's bodybuilding is unrealistic for almost everyone to do it. It's just some people just don't have the genetics to get like that, right? So that division should be as freaky, as crazy as possible. But bikini is the division of balance and not overly muscular physiques. So let's be realistic. How many people could look like Laura Lee if they wanted to? Which I doubt there's very many people who wouldn't want to look like Laura Lee. So it's a very small amount of people who could actually look like her. It's very, very small. I mean, we're talking about fractions of a percent that could actually do something like this, right? So it's going to be hard to make that a criteria for bikini because no one would be able to do it, right? And that's the problem when you run into these things. And also when you're thinking of bikini being a mainstream sport, you do have to make it where everyone's able to do it. If basketball was, you could only be 8 feet tall to play basketball. How many basketball, there wouldn't be basketball, right? So that's just an example there. It's kind of a rough one, but it gives you an example there, right? So now let's go into, and the reason I have Jennifer and Laura Lee pulled up is because these are kind of the two people that everyone thought would kind of go in and win it. But I think that it's important to talk about, not only is it that they, obviously, there was an upset to some capacity and that Jennifer was the number one contender for the Olympia title because she's second place, and then positions 1, position 3, and position 4 are vacated at this year's Olympia. So, it should be, if you think about it in that scenario, let's think about fighting or something like that for a second. I love boxing, so that's why I always use this as a reference. If all of a sudden the champion retired, the number 3 contender and the number 4 contender in boxing, just disappeared, and they're like, oh, we're not going to fight, for the world championship, and number 2 had to go against number 5, it would be pretty much guaranteed that the number 2 guy would win, right? But this isn't boxing. This is not boxing, and this shows you right here that it's not boxing, and especially in bikini, anything can change. And this is what's so crazy, and so what's exciting about this year's Olympia is that this is what's crazy about this year's Olympia, and it's actually really getting exciting. This actually made it more exciting. I think that if Jennifer would have won, it would have been less exciting going to Olympia because it is kind of one of those things where okay, well, the number 2 boxer is going against the number 5 boxer, right? It's not, we kind of know what's going to happen in that scenario. But here's the thing. Jennifer has now lost to Laura Lee, has lost to ISSA, has lost to Deraja, and has lost to Ashley. And so they've all beaten each other. Out of all those girls that I just mentioned, every one of them has beaten every one of them. Ashley's beaten ISSA, ISSA's beaten Ashley, Ashley's beaten Jennifer, Laura Lee. Laura Lee's beaten everyone. You know, everyone has beaten everyone. I think the only one who hasn't beaten anyone in that group, I think Deraja still has not beaten ISSA yet. I think that's the only one. So, like, everyone's beaten everyone, and no one is undefeated against all of them, right? So it's kind of crazy. And, like, even these one-offs happen. Like, ISSA lost to Ashley in Japan the year she won the Olympia, right? So anyone can win this year's Olympia. Like, it's a pretty cool thing because we don't know who's going to be the champion now. You know, if Jennifer went in and destroyed it with a perfect score, I think we'd all be leaning a little bit more towards Jennifer being the champion. But now it's like, oh, maybe not, right? So pretty cool. Now, here's a couple of things I want to go into with, like, Jennifer's physique. So first off, and I don't want to ever knock Jennifer. I love Jennifer. She's local and she's super nice, and her husband's awesome, and they're just great people. But when I was first seeing her, I thought she was farther off than she was. I was like, Jennifer's like, you know, it's her first show. She's like 92%, 93%, right? But I saw these pictures, and she's like 96, 97%. She's very close to being where she was. Now, she is always a tiny bit softer. She's not as hard as ISSA. But one of the things that I will say about Jennifer is, like, her posing is so perfect. Her posing is so perfect. This was kind of cool doing this stuff because I don't really do too many analysis like this. I'll do them for the Olympia and for the Arnold, and that's pretty much it. And, you know, it's just so much time, like, researching and studying it and all that. These things take a while. But it does make me better, so maybe I'll do some more of them. People seem to like them. But with Jennifer, I got a new level of respect for her because I was, like, analyzing her posing and stuff in these, and I'm going to show you guys something, and it's nuts. It actually doesn't even really make sense. All right, so first off, let's look at Jennifer's front pose versus, like, Laura Lee's front pose. You know, we know they both have really big glutes. Jennifer has really wide hips. You know, when you see her, she's very much a Coke bottle frame, right? Wide hips. Same with Laura Lee, very wide hips. But Jennifer, she points her toe a little bit more forward, and she doesn't sit in her hips so hard. Her toe is kind of more pointed forward, right? And she doesn't sit in her hips so hard. She kind of has them just a little bit twisted back. So, and Laura Lee does the same kind of thing with her foot. It's kind of position a little bit more forward. A lot of girls who have this huge glute profile, they'll position their foot kind of this way entirely. So Laura Lee does have her foot position, but her hips are still rotated just a little bit more this way, right? So is that going to be something that they can work on and make her better by rotating her hips backwards a little bit and hiding that glute a little bit? Would that make enough of a change? Or would that widen her up? Like, I'm sure they're playing with it at this point because they know that that's the issue. And they're really good over that camp. So I imagine they're messing with the posing in that front pose. I mean, there's the option of even bringing in the hand a little bit. I don't know, you know. But one thing we know is it's not helping her against Jennifer, against ISSA and Deraja, at least, right? So, is she going to bring that posing back? Is she going to switch her hips back farther? I doubt she's sitting into her hip. I just don't see that happening. I think she just has really big glutes. So, but Jennifer's doing a really good job at controlling the balance of her posing, right? And so how good is Jennifer at posing? I'm going to show you this. This is kind of crazy. Now, one of the things we talk about with posing is you want to be able to hit the same pose and look the same all the time, right? You shouldn't have this huge variance of posing when you're going from transition to front pose and back to back pose, back to front pose, and then every time it looks a little bit different, right? You should, if you know your physique and you know your strengths and you're practicing all the time, you should always be looking like pretty much exactly the same. No matter where you're at on the line, no matter what your position is, you should always be looking the same with your posing. And so, you know your body, know where your hips are, know where your shoulders are, make sure they're in line, make sure your positions are the right way every single time. You know, you can tell when someone poses a lot because they can really nail this. So let's take a look at Jennifer, and this is crazy. Let's take a look at Jennifer in her front pose at the Olympia and then her front pose here at the Tampa. Watch this. Well, now it's not doing it. Ha! Okay. So, sorry, it's not letting me do my normal back and forth, but take a look at this posing. Spot the difference. This is months apart. Like, I put the pictures right on top of each other. Is this crazy? spot the difference here. I mean, it is like exact. The tiniest difference is she's a tiny bit more open on this front pose, like on her shoulders, but like that could just be her, she's closer to the camera too. I mean, it is like, it's so crazy. It's like you're literally exactly the same from the pose from months ago till now. Like, how does that happen? It's like traced, like she just like traced herself and put herself on stage. So that is what you call precise posing. So good job for you, Jennifer. And then looking at her overall physique, you know, there really isn't that big of a difference. I thought it was a little bit more extreme when I was seeing like her check-in pictures and stuff like that. But then when I saw these actual pictures come out and on stage, you know, the actual video on stage that I was seeing, it just wasn't that sharp. So she looked really, really soft. But the video quality was terrible. But when you look at her in actual pictures and you look at her pictures from prior, she's actually not that far off. You could see a tiny bit of detail in her leg being a little bit better and her lower back being a tiny bit tighter, but it really isn't that significant. She's like 96% there. And it's her first show off of the off season, so I expect her in like a week to 2 weeks being 100%. And I looked at all of her pictures, like her step back pose. This is one of the ones I thought was like a lot softer. And I looked at her step back pose, and you know, it's a tiny bit softer. This is like the closest picture I could find to that step back pose. And you can see a little bit more detail. Here's the Olympia look. You can see the roundness of the hamstring, a tiny bit more detail in the leg and glute. You can see this line's kind of connected all the way down. You've talked about that before, where this line kind of connects and it just travels all the way down the leg. When that disappears, you can see the line. You can see that line now, you know, all the way down the leg. And it was just a hair away from that. Here, you know, you see the line kind of a little bit disappear right here. And it's just a tiny bit softer. I mean, it's 2 pounds, you know, it's nothing significant. It's just like, you know, a few days of cardio. You can see it in the lower back as well. So like her lower back right here on the upper edge of the lower back, you can see it. It's just a tiny bit. And we're talking literally, it's a hair. But at that level, there's just no room, you know. It's unfortunate. There's just no room. If this was her second show back, I think it would have been a different outcome. You know, she did not slip at all. This is just her first show back, and she's still very much a contender. She's still number 2 in the world right now, and the closest person to her is number 5, right? So that's the real scenario going into the Olympia right now. But the other scenario is everyone has beaten everyone at the Olympia, and so it is anyone's game. So let's go into the breakout star of the show, Deraja. And, you know, she is working her way up, and this weekend we saw a superstar being born. You know, in one show you come in second and you beat Laura Lee while Laura Lee has momentum, and you beat the number 2 girl in the world at her first show back. You're going to make a name for yourself, and Deraja definitely did that. She was working her way up already, but this really put a stamp on it, like full-on superstar now. There's really not a lot to critique. And when everyone was saying, like, people were like, oh, their hamstrings are way too tight, this is way too tight, like the girls are so too tight. I'm like, I don't know what you're seeing here, guys. Like, I don't know what you're seeing. Where's the striations? Where's the separation in the hamstring? Right? Where's anything but good quality detail? Like, you guys need to relax. So, I mean, so many people were like, oh, she's so tight, she's so tight. I'm like, where? Where is she so tight? You know? So, I mean, when we're talking about, yeah, you're supposed to have some shape to the hamstring. You're supposed to have some roundness to the hamstring. You know? That's supposed to show up. Yeah, you're going to have tie-ins. You're going to have deep tie-ins. You know, there's no deep V. There's no crazy development of the adductor. Like, if her adductor was developed, it'd be like this, right? It'd be popping in there like that and then come out. Where is it? It's not there. It's not there. You know, this is I don't think she could really improve her backside much at all. I think this is like, the glutes aren't squared off, you know, like that would be what a squared off glute would look like, where it's like really squared off at the top. Like it's developed, it's pushing the limits. Yeah, that's what bikini's supposed to, push the limits. The tie-in's there, it's crisp. There's no separation of the hamstring. There's no glute striations. There's no separation up here in the glute. The quad comes off a little bit. It shows development. It's not overdeveloped by any means. It's pushing it. It's bikini, top level. It should be pushing it. There's a little bit of detail in this back leg like I talked about. And I talked about in previous posts, I want to see a little bit of detail in this back leg, but not any crazy separation. This is too big of an area to just have just skin here. It should be a little bit of detail. So where's the striations in her quad where it's too much? Where is anything where it's too much? It's not. It's perfect. It's spot on, perfect lower body. Spot on. Like, nailed it. Knocked it out of the park. Spot on. So I don't know where everyone's getting this. They're too tight. They're too small. Like, she's got good V-taper from the back without being too much. She's not opening up her back at all. Good shoulder development. Good shoulder to waist ratio. That's the number 2, arguably number 1, you know? Based on the video quality, what I was seeing in the previous pictures, going into the finals, I had her as number 1, going into finals. And it's only for one specific reason, and I'll pull that up right here. So the reason that I was thinking, okay, Deraja might have ISSA beat here is because I felt like ISSA's core was too strong, but again, I had really low quality video, and I only had this is the only high definition picture I had going into it, where I could really see. It was this one, and this is not even her full core. And I was like, she looks a little tight, but ISSA always does push the conditioning. So I was just thinking, okay, if we're looking at full bikini package, because obviously that's what this show is going for, is full bikini package. She is a little bit tight, and you can see her ribs and core are a little bit tighter than when she won the Olympia. So I was thinking maybe she's a little bit tight. And I think that that's the only place where the decision was made between that. But what I will say is that the score was perfect all the way down, so it might not have been as close as I thought going into it. And there's always to be, learning to be in bikini. So here's where I think everything changed. So when you put ISSA next to Deraja, they're, it's a very close competition in this. It's very close. And what we talk about when everyone's talking about they're getting too tight, again, look for striations in ISSA, right? Look for feathering of the quads. Of course, there's a little bit of detail. The girls are lean. This is what we talked about. A little bit of detail in that quad, right? You see it? There's just a tiny bit of detail. They're giving a little bit of a squeeze to it to create that detail, but there's not full-on striations. There's not full-on, feathering of the quad, where you'll see some of these girls are so lean in their quad that it gets that feathering like that, and that's kind of what it looks like. Just so you guys can kind of get an idea of what you shouldn't want, I'll draw it on her. So let's say ISSA had this feathering like that, and then there's a quad separation that shows like that, and it'll go basically, it'll be like that on the outside quad. That would be striations and feathering. A little bit of a kiss of detail is not too lean, okay? So a kiss of detail, just a kiss right there, just a little kiss right there, right? Nothing crazy. That's bikini acceptable, right? That's not striations. That's not cross striations and deep separation and crazy density on the muscle, right? So that's what you're looking for. Now, when I look at these pictures, I would have ISSA winning over Deraja, but Deraja is super, super close. It's very close. And where it came down to was really the core. And I know that they're going to be working there at this camp. Actually, I'm really good friends with Paul, who's an awesome coach. And we were talking already about it, what they're going to try to work on and improve. And I think that that's the last piece of the puzzle. And I've talked about this before with Deraja, is that if she can get her core just a little bit tighter, that she's going to be, she could win the Olympia. And I think that is it. And if you look at them closely, that is really the difference. It's really just comes down to that. Everything else is very close. Shoulder width to hip, shoulder width to waist ratio, to balance of the hips. The only difference is when you look at Deraja and you look at ISSA's core, there's just more detail in ISSA's core. She's got that tiny waistline, and I think Deraja has a tiny waistline too. It just looks just a tiny bit in this upper area, just a little bit can use more detail. I would like a little more detail. And at the same argument, I would like a little less detail from ISSA. I would like to see a little bit less of those pronounced ribs from ISSA. So I think they can both improve on that a tiny bit. But if I go for impressiveness and wow factor, yeah, ISSA wins in the waist department on the wow factor because her waist is basically non-existent. And the it comes to bikini criteria, they're both there. I was leaning going into the night show more Deraja, but I didn't have this quality of pics, and ISSA doesn't look like she does in that pic that I showed you. She's not crazy. She's crazy tight for normal standards, but she's not over the top, oh my gosh, so shredded lean that it's changing the vision lean. And so yeah, when you look at the core on them, close analysis, I would lean towards ISSA, but it's still so close, man. I still would be I would still argue it with myself if I was judging this show. It'd be a really hard show to judge. And I would be like, okay, do I go with the wow and the little bit more extreme who's pushing it a little bit more? Or do I go with someone who fits the bikini criteria a little bit more in terms of the waistline, but is also a little bit softer than what I would like to see for the standard? So it's like, and we're talking about splitting hairs on perfection here. We're looking for imperfections on perfect women. It's so ridiculous that we even like try to point anything out, right? But that's what we're doing. That's a sport. We look for imperfections on perfect women. But that's where she won, and she won with a perfect score. I was thinking it would be closer because there's a lot of arguments. There's a lot of arguments there on both for going either way. But as you can see here, it was a perfect score all the way down. Laura Lee had 20 points here, which means that 4 judges had her in 5th place. So how it works is you get 1 point. You get 1 point for first. You get, or 5 judges had her in 4th place. Sorry, you get 1 point for first, 2 points for second, 3 points for third. All the way down, and then the lowest score wins. That's how it works. Kind of like golf. Lowest score wins. So let's look at number 1. All right. So 5 points for ISSA. Perfect score. 5 judges had her in 1st place. 10 points for Deraja. 5 judges had her in 2nd place. 5 times 2 points equals 10 points. 3rd place, Jennifer. 5 judges had her in 3rd place. 5 times 3 is 15. And Laura Lee, 5 times 4 is 20. Francesca, 5 times 5 is 25. And then all the way down to Danielle, 5 times 6 is 30, right? So all the way down, the judges were unanimous on their decisions. And as you could see, they actually went, to them it was pretty clear cut. All the way, you can see here, 40, 45 points. I mean, we have perfect scores like all the way, and then it gets a little bit harder when the girls aren't as clear cut. You have 58, 56, 73, 74. Like they're not like perfect all the way down. So I saw it being really close. I thought it would be a little bit more of a, 1 or 2 points would go to Deraja. But the judges, they were clear on their decisions, and so they are absolutely sticking to the bikini criteria. There's not this huge change in bikini. Don't worry about it. It is not going to change like that. It never will. But that is an amazing show, and it really does set up a crazy Olympia. I mean, the Olympia is going to be very, very exciting. If you have a chance to get out there, I would go see it because you're going to watch some craziness. Here's the scenarios. You have Deraja, who is she going to be? Is this a one-off, or is she going to be Jennifer and Laura Lee every time? Her camp over there knows what they need to improve on now. It's just a little bit in the waistline. There's really nothing else to improve on. It's like right there. So is she going to improve that and actually take that 1st place? She's got momentum now going into it. Is Jennifer going to go on a run the rest of the year and be like, okay, that was a one-off. I'm going to win, 3 shows going to Olympia. Is she going to win the Arnold and, make a stand saying, hey, I was my first show back. I wasn't 100% there. And she's going to go win it like everyone thought she was? Or is ISSA going to win her 2nd Olympia, being the only bikini pro so far to ever lose an Olympia title and then gain it back? She would actually be the first Miss Bikini Olympia to not place and then come back and win it again too. But who else has that opportunity? Ashley has that opportunity. She's won 3 Olympias. Ashley's on a crazy run right now. She's won 6 shows. No bikini pro this year. I'm going to say this out loud. No bikini pro this year has won 2 shows besides Ashley this year. Isn't that crazy? And she's not only won 2, she's won 6. So, and she's doing big shows. Like people are like, oh, why didn't she do Tampa or whatever? Like, dude, she did a lot of tier 2 shows, and she's doing tier 1 shows at the Arnold and the Olympia. Like, so, she did the New York and Pittsburgh are both tier 2s as well. So it's just how everything lined up. So, and she's beaten every girl in the Tampa show already, but every girl in the Tampa, the top 4, have beaten her. So craziness, right? What an Olympia it sets up. So is Ashley going to take that momentum and get an Olympia title and be the first one to lose it and then come back and win it again? Or is ISSA going to lose it and come it back again? Will Jennifer get her Olympia title? Will Deraja sneak up out of nowhere and win it? Will they make the corrections with Laura Lee and she comes back and takes that title because she was number 2 at one point. So there's so many crazy things happening in this Olympia that it really got, I think that Jennifer losing made it more exciting. I think that it actually made it a better Olympia. And then, you know, whatever happens at the Arnold is going to be even a little bit more of a dictating factor of what's going to happen at the Olympia. But again, as you could see, all these girls have beaten each other. There is no reason that it could be anyone's day on that day. There is no clear-cut winner. You know, it's kind of crazy. There's no one out there who's beaten all these girls all year long and never lost to them. It's just a crazy scenario. So I'm super excited for it. Thank you guys for watching this. I'm getting so much feedback about it. I'll do these. I'm not going to do these every time. It's just too much time. But I'll do them at bigger shows, maybe some of the more tier 1 shows, tier 2 shows and stuff, probably for the Arnold. And I do it pretty much every year for the Arnold. But yeah, so that's what you can look for. Let me know if you have any questions. I do these, like how I do these assessments. I do physique assessments for people. If you want to submit them on the website, you could do that. And I'll send you back a video about your physique, tell you what you need to do to change it and make progressions to your next level as well. Other than that, thanks so much. Adam, teamelitephysique.com. I'll talk to you guys later.